Imagine getting into your car tomorrow morning. You start the engine, pull onto the highway, and within minutes you're traveling at 60 miles per hour. You barely think about the trip. It's simply part of everyday life. Now imagine making that same journey 100,000 years ago. There were no roads, no bridges, no maps. Every mile meant walking through unfamiliar land filled with predators, harsh weather, and unknown dangers. A trip that takes less than an hour today could have taken days on foot, with no guarantee of making it home. Today we fly across oceans, drive across countries, and order products from the other side of the world without thinking twice. Distance has become so effortless that we rarely appreciate it. But for nearly all of human history, getting from one place to another was one of humanity's greatest challenges. For hundreds of thousands of years, humans had only one form of transportation: their own feet. That simple fact shaped where people could live, what resources they could reach, who they could meet, and how much of the world they could explore. Civilization didn't begin with engines, ships, or wheels. It began with walking. But here's the question. If humans became the most successful travelers on Earth, why weren't we the fastest? A cheetah can sprint at nearly 70 miles per hour. Horses can outrun us with ease. Even many smaller animals are much faster. So how did humans spread across almost every continent while stronger and faster animals never did? The answer wasn't speed. It was endurance. A healthy person can walk roughly 20 miles in a day, rest, then repeat the journey day after day for weeks. Very few large mammals can sustain that kind of long-distance travel. Our bodies evolved for exactly that purpose. The arches in our feet store and release energy like springs. Our Achilles tendon acts like an elastic band, reducing the effort needed with every step. A specialized ligament helps stabilize our head while moving, and millions of sweat glands allow us to cool our bodies far more efficiently than most mammals, which mainly rely on panting. Evolution didn't make us the fastest runners. It made us one of the most efficient long-distance travelers on Earth. One of the strongest pieces of evidence comes from Tanzania. In 1978, paleoanthropologist Mary Leakey and her team discovered fossilized footprints at Litoli, preserved in volcanic ash about 3.6 million years ago. Two individuals had walked side by side, leaving footprints that survived for millions of years. These are the oldest widely accepted fossil footprints showing human ancestors walking upright, and remarkably, they look strikingly similar to our own. Long before cities, long before farming, long before written history, our ancestors were already walking on 2 feet. For millions of years, that remained humanity's greatest transportation technology. Then everything changed. Around 70,000 years ago, modern humans began expanding beyond Africa. It wasn't a single migration but a gradual movement of small groups over thousands of years. They spread into the Middle East, across Asia, into Europe, eventually reaching Siberia. During the Ice Age, lower sea levels exposed a land bridge connecting Siberia and Alaska, allowing humans to enter North America. From there, they gradually spread throughout the Americas. Some of these journeys covered thousands of miles. What's remarkable is that they had no maps, no GPS, no idea what lay beyond the next mountain range. Yet they kept moving. Archaeologists have discovered obsidian hundreds of miles from its volcanic source, marine shells far inland, and valuable materials transported across mountain ranges long before written history. These discoveries reveal that early humans weren't wandering aimlessly. They traveled with purpose. They exchanged resources, shared knowledge, met distant communities, and followed information passed down across generations. Long before highways connected civilizations, humans had already built vast networks on foot. But eventually they encountered a challenge that walking alone couldn't solve. Water. A wide river could stop an entire journey. For hundreds of thousands of years, rivers divided migration routes, hunting grounds, and trade paths. Reaching one often meant searching miles upstream for a safe crossing, or turning back altogether. Eventually, humans achieved something no other land mammal intentionally does. They crossed open water. How do we know? One of the strongest clues comes from the Indonesian island of Flores. In 2003, archaeologists uncovered stone tools there dating to roughly 800,000 years ago. The discovery itself wasn't the surprise. The island was. Flores has never been connected to mainland Asia by a land bridge. Even during the Ice Age, several miles of open water always separated it from the nearest land. That means the toolmakers or their ancestors somehow crossed the sea. Scientists still don't know exactly how. Perhaps they built simple rafts. Perhaps they floated on naturally buoyant logs. Or perhaps they used a method that has left no trace behind. The truth is, we don't know. Wood decays, bamboo rots, plant fibers disappear over time. The earliest watercraft were almost certainly built from materials that rarely survive for hundreds of thousands of years. But the stone tools remain. They provide strong evidence that ancient humans, or close human relatives, reached an island that could only be accessed by crossing open water. It marked the beginning of a new chapter in transportation. Human movement was no longer limited to land. The first boats probably looked nothing like the boats we know today. There were no engineers, no blueprints, no shipbuilders. The earliest crossing may have started with something as simple as a floating log. Someone may have noticed it stayed afloat, climbed onto it, learned to steer it, and eventually discovered that tying several logs together created a more stable platform. Like most great inventions, boats were likely the result of countless small experiments rather than a single breakthrough. By around 65,000 years ago, modern humans had achieved something even more remarkable. They reached Australia. Even during the Ice Age, stretches of open ocean still separated Australia from Southeast Asia. Reaching it was no accident. Successful crossings required planning, cooperation, and some form of reliable watercraft. Imagine standing on a shoreline 65,000 years ago. No compass, no weather forecast, no guarantee that land even existed beyond the horizon. Yet people climbed aboard and sailed into the open sea. It remains one of the boldest journeys in human history. The oldest surviving boat ever discovered is the Pest canoe, found in the Netherlands and dating to roughly 10,000 years ago. It is simply a hollowed-out tree trunk, proving that humans had already mastered shaping wood into functional boats. But boats almost certainly existed much earlier. People had already settled islands that could never be reached on foot. The boats disappeared because they were built from wood and other natural materials that eventually decayed. The boats are gone. The settlements remain. Together, they tell the same story. Water was no longer a barrier. It had become a highway. Crossing water solved one problem, but another remained. Wait, person could walk for miles. A group could migrate across continents. But carrying heavy loads was another challenge entirely. Imagine hunting a large animal. The meat could feed an entire family. The real challenge was getting it home. A person can carry only so much before exhaustion takes over. For most of history, transportation wasn't limited by distance. It was limited by weight. The solution was simple. Instead of carrying heavy loads, humans dragged them. Animal hides could be loaded with meat, firewood, or supplies and pulled across the ground, allowing people to move far more than they could carry. No direct examples of these earliest transport systems have survived because leather, wood, and plant fibers naturally decay. However, experimental archaeology, ethnographic evidence, and historical observations strongly suggest that dragging loads was one of humanity's earliest transportation methods. Eventually, humans improved the idea. Instead of dragging supplies directly across the ground, they placed them on a simple wooden frame known as a travois. Two long poles were joined at one end, with a platform or woven net suspended between them. As the poles slid across the ground, the load rested above the surface, making it much easier to move heavy cargo over long distances. No prehistoric wooden travois have survived, but when Europeans first reached North America, many indigenous peoples were still using them. Combined with archaeological evidence, these observations suggest the technology had existed for thousands of years. Sometimes an invention disappears. Its knowledge doesn't. Then humans discovered an even greater advantage. Instead of relying only on their own strength, they partnered with animals. The first wasn't the horse, it was the dog. Dogs were domesticated at least 15,000 years ago, and possibly even earlier. They hunted alongside humans, guarded camps, and in colder regions pulled sleds loaded with food, tools, and supplies across snow and ice. For the first time, transportation no longer depended entirely on human muscle. But dogs had limits. They were dependable. They were intelligent. Yet they lacked the size and strength needed for much heavier work. That breakthrough came on the grasslands of Central Asia. Around 5,500 years ago, people living in present-day Kazakhstan began domesticating horses. Some of the strongest evidence comes from the Butai culture. Archaeologists have found horse teeth showing where patterns consistent with bits, along with chemical traces of mare's milk preserved inside pottery. Together, these discoveries show that horses were no longer simply hunted. They had become partners. People rode them, milked them, raised them, and gradually built entire ways of life around them. Almost overnight, at least by the standards of human history, the world became much smaller. For hundreds of thousands of years, humans traveled at walking speed. Now they could move several times faster. Communities that once seemed impossibly distant became connected. Trade expanded, ideas spread farther, information traveled faster, and warfare changed forever. For the first time, armies on horseback could cover enormous distances in a matter of days instead of weeks. The age of animal-powered transportation had begun, yet one invention was still missing. Surprisingly, it appeared much later than most people imagine. Humans had already crossed open water, reached Australia, domesticated horses, and built long-distance trade networks long before they invented the wheel. The oldest known wooden wheel, discovered near Ljubljana in present-day Slovenia, dates to about 5,200 years ago. Why did it take so long? Because a wheel alone solves nothing. It also needs an axle, relatively smooth ground, and eventually roads. In forests, mountains, muddy terrain, or rocky landscapes, dragging loads or using pack animals remained far more practical. Ironically, the wheel's earliest use wasn't transportation. It was pottery. Ancient potters used rotating wheels to shape clay into bowls and storage vessels. At some point, someone likely realized that if a heavy object could roll instead of slide, moving it would require far less effort. That simple idea transformed transportation forever. The first carts were crude. Their solid wooden wheels were heavy, slow, and difficult to use on rough ground. But they introduced a revolutionary concept. Instead of dragging weight, people could roll it. Around 2000 BCE, lighter spoked wheels appeared across parts of Eurasia, making vehicles faster, stronger, and far more efficient. But even the best cart was useless without roads. As civilizations expanded, road building became just as important as the wheel itself. Some of the earliest paved roads appeared in ancient Mesopotamia more than 5,000 years ago. Centuries later, the Romans transformed road construction into an engineering science, building thousands of miles of durable roads that connected cities, military bases, and trade routes across Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East. For the first time, three technologies worked together: the wheel, the draft animal, the road. Together, they transformed civilization. Trade expanded farther than ever before. Cities became more connected. Empires grew larger, while food, raw materials, and military supplies could move across vast distances with unprecedented efficiency. Transportation was no longer just about survival. It became the foundation of economies, governments, and civilizations. Looking back, one pattern becomes clear. Every major breakthrough solved a specific problem. Walking allowed humans to explore new lands. Boats overcame the barrier of water. Sleds and travois made heavy loads easier to move. Animals multiplied human strength and speed. Wheels increased efficiency. Roads connected everything together. None of these breakthroughs happened overnight. Each was built on thousands of years of observation, experimentation, and countless small improvements made by generations whose names have been lost to history. Today, we drive cars, fly across oceans, and use smartphones to navigate anywhere on Earth within seconds. Distance has become so effortless that we rarely stop to think about it. But for most of human history, distance was humanity's greatest obstacle. Our ancestors crossed continents on foot. They sailed into unknown seas without knowing whether land existed beyond the horizon. Not to break records, not for adventure, but because survival demanded it. Every highway, every railroad, every airport, every cargo ship, and every spacecraft exists because generation after generation refused to stop exploring. The story of transportation isn't really about wheels, ships, or engines. It's the story of human curiosity, the determination to solve one impossible problem after another, and to leave the world easier to cross than they found it. Because in the end, the greatest vehicle humanity ever built wasn't made of wood, stone, or steel. It was the simple idea that there's always another horizon waiting to be reached.